All right, everybody, welcome to Laura Entertainment. It is me, Mr. Michael Gibbons, and we are sitting down and talking to Leslie Vass, the man behind the Shattered Dream story. So I am going to actually hand this over to Mr. Michael Gibbons and Mr. Leslie Vass.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hi,
I think
everyone.
I
How you
think who
doing?
y'all really need to hear from is Leslie, just to hear a little bit about his story.
Uh, at the age of 17 in 1975, I was attending Southern High School in Baltimore, Maryland, playing basketball and hopefully looking forward to a life in professional area of sports, of basketball arena. All those thoughts came to an end February 15th, 1975, when I went to the local store that was in our neighborhood to make a purchase for my mom's. And as I went into the store, I spoke to the people in the back. I remember walking to the front of the store and speaking with the fellow named Doc that was the owner of the store. He told me that the newspapers that I saw was outside in the machine. And as I went out to the front, I heard a voice behind me say, "You with the leather coat on, step back up against the wall." And it's like other people standing at the corner with me, but I really wasn't paying them no mind because my purpose was just get the paper and leave. As I turned around, I noticed that there was a police officer facing me with a handgun pointed at me, told me to walk over to the wall and put my face against the wall. And I pointed to myself because I know I hadn't done anything. So, I mean, I had never had any interaction with the police before. I had no understanding of what actually was transpiring like that. They officer put the gun to my back of my head and told me to keep my face towards the wall. And then he said, I heard him say, "Is this the man?" And all I heard was a voice say, "It looked like him." And then the guy said, "You under arrest for armed robbery." I'm like, "Armed robbery? I just came out the store. You can walk in and ask Doc. I ain't robbed nobody. I ain't do this." So he said, "Well, shut up, tell it to the commissioner, and you're under arrest." And I was like, "For what?" I said, the man in the store can tell you." He said, "That's what you charged with robbing the store, the Westport Pharmacy." I said, "Man, I know Doc. I didn't rob no store. I just came in to buy paper for my mom's. I usually do." He didn't want to hear that, man. They called for what they used to call the paddy wagon, which was the transportation van at the time back then in the 70s. And the guy came with the paddy wagon. They put me in the back of it, and they took me to the Southern District Police Station, which was a couple blocks away from where I lived. Never been processed or arrested like this as a child, my mindset was totally about what moms told me, what I had to do, what my mom said to do. And all I could remember while I was riding this car is she gonna be mad, you know, because all I went to do was go to the store to get a paper, man. And here it is, these people arrest me and I don't know what's going on. And I'm scared. I'm being straight up, I'm scared. We get there, they put me in a cell, but before they put me in a cell, when they got me to the desk, the Sarge was at the desk and he said, "Your date of birth and name." I said, "Leslie Vass." He said, "And how old are you?" I said, 17. He turned around and yelled down the thing. He said, "Yo, we got a big kid, a big juvenile up here, right?" He said, "What's your date of birth?" I told him 9/7/1957. And he said, "Wow, you a big ass kid like that, you know?" And I'm just looking at him because I'm scared. They tell me they're gonna put me in a cell. They take me back there and they put me in a cell that's opposite all the other people, but it's separate from everybody, right? In an area where I'm it's a lady on one side, well, selling in the middle, and a lady on the other side. Then on around the corner, you could hear the guys talking and stuff. So I stayed in there until like almost like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. And they came and took me out and carried me up there. And as they had me standing there and they had the handcuffs on me, I remember looking through the window and I could see my mother. And man, I was like a sight of relief came over me. And when they called me in there, I went to go to her and she was like, no, you got to stay over there. And the police told me stand here. And I remember the commissioner that I learned said, you're going to be released on your own recon into the custody of your mother because you're a juvenile. But he said, you charged with armed robbery. And I said, yeah, I didn't rob nobody. He said, don't worry about it. He said, your mom's going to have to get an attorney or one will be provided to you. He said, but I'm telling you right now, don't you go back into that store or say nothing to none of them people. I said, sir, I knew the man that owned the store. I had just talked to them. And he said, well, you're going to have to get that information to your attorney. I don't know what attorney is. It's a word, okay? They released me into the custody of my mom's. I remember when we was walking out, she said, what happened? And I said, Mama, I went in there to buy the paper. I saw Doc. I said, I saw Mr. Clarence, old man Clarence was a delivery driver that worked in the neighborhood. He used to come in the neighborhood and play cards at people's houses and all that stuff. And I said, they spoke to me, was asking me about my basketball game because I played for BNBL, which was a neighborhood basketball league that had just started. And I said, they said that someone robbed the store. I said, well, they can tell them that I didn't rob because they know me, right? So she was like, I gotta put out for a lawyer and all this. And I thought she was upset with me. And it's a lot that I didn't learn about actually until after my incarceration that related to things that have happened prior to me actually being convicted with my mom's as far as her upbringing and so forth. But as we grow older, we learn. So I mean, everything is good now because I understand the struggles that she went through back then, and then trying to raise 3 boys by herself as a single independent woman. Okay, a lot of things I didn't comprehend fully then that I do now. But nonetheless, I ended up February 15th. I was arrested, released into the custody of my mother on the 16th that morning. July, I'll skip forward to July the 2nd, 1975, is when I actually went to trial. The first time I appeared in courts from my arrest. There was no pretrial motions, no pretrial hearings or anything in my case that I became familiar with or aware of. I was never taken to court until July 2nd. Me and my mom's caught the bus and went down to this. It used to be the Supreme Bench for Baltimore City at the time. And when we got there, I remember this attorney that she had paid. His name was, oh my God. I try not to even remember this man's name, really. But it's, my train of thought is really off right now. But this attorney actually didn't do anything. What he did was, do you have a check for me? That was my first meeting with him. Did she send you a check for me? And I was like, oh, she gave me an envelope to give to you. He said, okay. He said, so I said, well, sir, I said, what happened? I said, these people arrested me and charged me with robbery, but I just came out the store. He said, look, don't worry about that. He said, do what your mother told you to do and listen to what I say. He said, when, it come time for them to ask you what kind of trial you have, say you want trial by judge. So I said, I thought my mother said trial by jury. He said, I'm telling you trial by judge. And I'm looking at this man, and all the while I'm just watching his demeanor and his attitude towards me. It's like every time I only met with him twice before I went to trial. One time I met with him, I remember he just had me come down and deliver a check, right, that my mom had gave me. The next time I met with him, the only thing he said to me was, "Yeah, did you see the man that you were charged with robbing?" I said, "What man?" I said, "They said I robbed the drugstore." I said, "That's what them said. They charged me with robbing the drugstore that day." That's what my documentation said. It didn't say anything about a armed robbery that happened 4.5 months before my arrest. So I'm really at a loss because that's November. And then they said, yeah, it happened November 2nd, 1974. I said, well, I got arrested February 15th, 1975. I said, I don't know nothing about doing whatever y'all talking about. And to this day, I still have issues about how when I went to court that morning, the state's attorney, the man that was accused of that accused me of being the person who committed this robbery were actually in the hallway outside of the courtroom before the courtroom doors were open with Mr. Chester and the man named Willie Adams, who were witnesses to this robbery that happened in November 1974. Those very two men were listed as witnesses for the state. And they went to the state's attorney. When they saw me and they asked me, Leslie, what you doing down here, boy? I know you ain't in no trouble. And I'm looking at them like I'm a kid. And I'm like, I don't want to say nothing because the judge told me if I say something to them, they're going to lock me back up. And I ain't like being in that cell like that. And I started crying. And Mr. Clarence said, Leslie, what's wrong with you? I said, they told me if I talk to y'all, they're going to lock me back up. And they looked at me. Him and Mr. Will, I'll never forget, they looked at me like, what the hell are you talking about? And I said, they locked me up for robbing y'all. And he said, they locked you up? You're the person they got us down here for? And they went to the state's attorney. It's my hand of God. They told this man, they said, y'all locked this kid up. We know him. He plays basketball in the community. A kid, he's been coming in the store for over 10 years. We know him. They looked at that man, Mr. Chester, and they said, you wrong. That kid wasn't the one that robbed you. That state's attorney told them, I'm dismissing y'all as witnesses. We won't need your testimony. Now I don't know what none of this means because I don't have a legal understanding of anything. Nothing. Period regarding the criminal justice system. Went in there. He had told my mom that she need to go settle her bill at his office. And this is what I found on after fact now. So she left me in the hallway waiting for the doors to be open. When they opened the door and Mr. Chestnut saw me, and they actually took me to the state's attorney and said to him, this kid is not the one that robbed him. Y'all making a mistake. He's not, we know him. And we're the ones that seen the people who committed the robbery and gave them gave the police the tag number of the vehicle that led to the arrest of the two other men the same night the robbery happened. I don't know what they're talking about. All I know, I had been arrested, I was charged, I was released, and they said I robbed these people that day, that store that day. It didn't say nothing about a robbery happened November 1974. Okay. We get into trial, and I remember them saying, the case of State of Maryland versus Leslie Vass. So I was sitting there, then Mr. Conrad, that was his name, Robert Paul Conrad. I don't even want to think about this man. But he came, man, and he went to the state's attorney and they were talking. Then he came over to me when I was sitting there on the bench and he said, I thought I told you not to talk to anybody. And I'm like looking at him like, what's wrong with you? He said, them people, I said, that man, Mr. Chester and Mr. Willie Adams said something about a robbery that happened in November. I said, I was arrested in February. I don't know nothing about no robbery in November. I said, I didn't commit no robbery. I said, I was went in the store to buy a newspaper. He said, you don't know that the person that, well, you don't know what the man looked like that you were charged with robbing? I said, man, I ain't never seen nobody. I said, them people, only thing I remember is hearing a voice behind me when they was arresting me. I didn't see nobody. I didn't turn my head because the police officer said he was going to shoot me if I moved my head. I'm a 17-year-old. I'm scared, you know? So, I mean, to be truthful with you, and no disrespect to anybody, during that period of time in Baltimore, it was a racial issue regarding youth of Baltimore City. There was a lot of controversy and racial issues going on in the state of Maryland, especially Baltimore City, when it concerns the youth there. A lot of individual youth were being rounded up and placed over at Baltimore City Jail and so forth. That's why during the course of my imprisonment, I met a lot of other dudes that were younger around my age because they were placed on, all of us were on a section together. And then when we were convicted, we were thrown into the Maryland State Penitentiary, which was the maximum security facility for the whole state of Maryland, okay? Whereas when I was found guilty, I couldn't believe it. And the judge said that he believed what the victim had said. And I'm trying to tell these people, even in my transcript, I don't know what they're talking about November. I was arrested February. That's all I can know. All I know is that I was arrested in February. November, I have no idea about anything. I've never met this man before. I never saw him. And then I learned that he was a part-time delivery driver for the Westport Pharmacy, and he only worked one day on the weekend. Usually on the weekend, I stayed at my grandfather's house because I worked. My mom's when I worked for Millie's Bakery. So I mean, all my weekends were at my grandfather's house. Getting convicted and sentenced to 20 years for an armed robbery. And at the time, I was excelling in my abilities in basketball. I was making a name for myself in the community. My name was posted on the what they call Player of the Week a couple times in the News American newspaper in Baltimore. I tried to go back and get copies of that, but that paper company went out of business, and the Baltimore Sun, and everybody told me they didn't know where all the records were at. So I've even went so far as to go all the way out California to try to find the records pertaining to what was going on, what happened after my imprisonment. So I finally get convicted. I'm placed in the Maryland State Penitentiary. I'm placed in A block, cell 125. I can hear the children and the people outside playing, throwing balls, and they go to school and all. I can hear all those same things that I used to do as a kid. But I was behind a wall, a concrete brick wall, and I couldn't see out into the street because I was on what they call the flats, which is the first level. Above me was death row. And the guys on death row were the ones that actually helped me start learning how to address the injustice that I went through. They used a term when I first started talking about my case, because initially I wouldn't talk to nobody. I don't mean no harm. I went in prison for something I don't know nothing about. I don't care nothing about none of you people in here. I don't know y'all. You don't know me. The only thing I know is I didn't do this and I'm not for nothing. Okay? That's I don't mean no harm, no disrespect, but that's how I felt because of the kind of environment that I was in. I had seen some things, and maybe because of where I was raised and the people that had been in my life during that time. I had to remember before I went to prison, my mom's had friends, and we lived in a community where people ran numbers, the illegal lotteries and stuff. And my mother's friend, Morris, Mr. Morris, was a number runner. He ran the numbers, the illegal street lotteries. I didn't know that. I didn't know what they did. I know they used to tell me, go to the skin joint and, run to the store, get cigarettes and buy sodas and stuff like that and bring it back. And they would give me a couple of dollars and change and stuff as a kid. And as a kid, out when school was out and things like that, not during school time. I'm in school. So when I'm in prison, Mr. Morris and them had individuals that they knew that was in this kind of environment. And then people used to come to me. Them people were older men that would come to me. These men were men who had businesses that would have actually ended up committing crimes. It was there. A fellow by the name of Liddy Jones, another fellow by the name of Lowell Melvin. Um, I met a lot of people during the time I was in prison, and those people helped me understand what had actually happened. The term that they called it was, when you've been wrongfully imprisoned in that manner, is you've been blacklisted, you've been blackballed, and all that. You know, uh, I found out that my attorney was an actual member of the Attorney Grievance Commission for the state of Maryland. Man, he sat on the board that represented attorneys when they illegally did things. I didn't find that out till after I had over 5 years in on my sentence when I filed a complaint against him. And ended up going to court, and the people told me, well, he's the Attorney Grievance Commission. He's a bar council member. He's in high standards and all that. Who am I? But young, ignorant African American kid from the inner city. And I felt like my life didn't mean anything to them. So my attitude when I was in prison was, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I would never allow this to ever happen to me ever again. And I'm going to fight. And that's what I'll continue to do, even now, since I'm home. I filed a complaint in the federal court. They call it a 1983 civil suit, civil claims. And I got a hearing. At the time that I got it, I had 7 years in. And I had filed, and I was like, yes, because I knew the state court wasn't going to give me any kind of relief because they knew that I was not the person. I learned while I was in prison that the guy I was mistaken for, his real name was Bucky Nutt. They call him Bucky Nutt, right? His real name was Charles Parker, right? This guy was an informant for the very same detectives that was in charge of investigating that robbery. I didn't learn until after I was in prison that the people who actually committed the robbery were home on a weekend visit from a drug program when they committed that robbery. I believe between y'all that Bucky Nutt was in the car when they stopped him because there was 3 people in that vehicle when they stopped it. But for some reason, the only 2 that were arrested were the 2 men that were supposed to have been, involved in it, that admitted committing the robbery. As I learned later from this case I went to what they call the archives to get a copy of Bucky Nutt's history regarding this armed robbery. And the other 2 men that was convicted, they were convicted and admitted committing the robbery before I was ever arrested. These men received 5 years. One received 5 years probation. The other man received 5 years tacked onto the sentence that he was actually serving. Okay. Bucky Nutt disappeared. But he was a well-known associate of the guy Charles Parker, who was supposed to have been my co-defendants on these crimes. During the time of me being in prison, they never housed me in any facility that them men were in, because I would always check. I worked as a clerk. I put myself in a position where I could find out what I need to find out. Meaning, I worked as a clerk in the medical department. I worked as a clerk for state use industries, metalworking department, where I received my certification as a metalworking candidate. I did body and fender. I did these things because I wanted to make sure that if by the grace of God, if I got released, I would never have to worry about this not being a thing, a part of my history. But I didn't know about all the other stuff that came after the conviction. So we talk about that later.
Yeah.
That's good. Is that all right?
Yeah, we gotta save them something. They'll
Yeah.
see.
But I mean, I want to tell y'all, I'm so honored and so appreciative to everybody that's involved in it. I mean, y'all really, you don't know what I feel every day I wake up. And I see different things about the story. I've been doing some other things here in Baltimore, like different events and stuff, and trying to keep myself focused and positive, because it hurts to look at, after going through all that I went through with these people from the state of Maryland, to actually get home to prove that you've been wrongfully convicted, to still have to suffer and be treated less than human because of a criminal record that should not have never been, and the state admitted that it was a mistake. I could understand if they said, oh, well, it's a question, but you tell me, you give me documentation and proof that you know that this was a true error, but you still hold that same record against me for the remainder of my days. I came home when I was 28. I still had a mindset of a 17-year-old. I didn't understand anything about life. I ain't trying to play the victim, baby fire stuff, because man, it's not about none of that. I did not know. Life changed in 10 years. I came home to being told, oh, you need to do this, and if you don't do this, you can't stay with me. Those kind of things, you understand? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I'm just getting out here, and I don't know what to do. But because of your minds, because of the change in people's attitudes, it's all about a dollar, money, which you can give. And it goes for family all too, that I went through. When I wrote the book that I actually posted on Scribe, I did that as a therapy for myself because I needed it at the time. And everything that I wrote in there was the God's truth. I didn't cut no corners because I feel like I was doing myself an injustice. The state wasn't going to help me get any kind of closure mentally with what was going on. And at the age that I was then having relationships with young women I was in a relationship with, and did not understand what a relationship consisted of. I mean, let's be realistic. At different parts of my life, this thing has touched, and it continues to touch, even at this age that I'm at now, at 65. But I'm thankful, I'm humble, and I'm appreciative for everybody that's involved in this story. Thank y'all.
You're welcome. All right, with that, you guys, I am going to wrap up the recording session of this, and then everybody can stay on, and I'll open it up where you guys can actually ask questions while we got him on here. I'm going to end this. I want to say thank you, Leslie, for being on here, and thank you, Mr. Michael Gibbons, for being on here. But that's it for now.
I remember that night when I first gave my heart to yours, I was scared and feeling insecure. You told me, my darling, even on your darkest days, you'd always reassure